Hi, I'm Maddie Girlmeat, and oh no, oh god, that's longer than I thought. Oh shit, I really kinda let it die, huh? Okay, not great, not great, not great.
Forget-me-nots are blue. Robin's eggs are also blue. The ocean's blue, but it's just a reflection of the sky. And the dash is blue too.
If you're like me in that you were in a particular part of the internet between 2011 and 2014, were mortified by growing up, had strange repressed feelings about your gender and sexuality, and also watched a children's cartoon about colorful horses that solved friendship problems, you probably Googled, at least once if you were like me, is Rainbow Dash a lesbian? And if you didn't, that's fine, I guess, because it's my video, and I get to choose what we talk about. But also, in 2014, there weren't, like, a wealth of peer-reviewed resources on the subject. All you really had was this guy who thought the wings on the horses were, like, genitals, because... I'm so sorry. I have this video from my childhood on in the background while I'm writing, and the thesis is... Fuck, okay, never mind. The video is about suppression of queer narratives in children's media. Like, that's... Intro done. Section 1. We're going. So, let's talk about some words. The APA defines sexualization as reducing someone to their sex characteristics. Quote, sexualization occurs when a person's value comes only from his or her sexual appeal or behavior to the exclusion of other characteristics. Which... I think we can agree is kind of weird to do with horses, although it's not completely unheard of. Sexuality, as I'm sure we all understand, is kind of a completely different thing. The PC word for it, according to Psychus, which I don't know how to pronounce, and is short for... What is Psychus short for? Is a sexual orientation, but that didn't make a good enough title card, and this one is snappier, so... You know, whatever, but it's essentially who you're attracted to. And there is, unfortunately, this very powerful conflation of the two that...
Very unlikely to actually be a lesbian, since she was completely unaffected by a view that many a straight man or gay girl would pay their life savings to see.
Yeah, like that. Like, okay, the specific thesis about same-gender attraction that I was exposed to as a kid was that if you were not immediately aroused by the sight of your same-gender friends, you just couldn't be a homosexual. Here's some lived experience for you. I've finally reached the level of queer where my friends have invited me to, like, burlesque shows without actually telling me that that was going to happen. And if I, a sexually stunted bisexual who, has been quoted as saying I am attracted to just about everyone can, you know, avoid popping one at what is essentially a surprise nudity show, and you can tell I was surprised because I'm really uncomfortable talking about it. But, like, if I can resist that, I'm pretty sure Rainbow Dash can not pop one at her friends who are usually naked anyway because they are horses. Continuing to be naked does not constitute definitive proof of anything. That was an entire tangent though, so, you know. Part of the problem, I think, is the word too, right? Like homosexual, heterosexual, sexual.
Now, would you vote for an admitted heterosexual?
No.
The word itself was actually popularized in 1952 by the DSM-2, which, for those of you who don't have a therapist, stands for the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual of Mental Disorders. So, yikes. It's like the word and the concept itself are at the center of this weird cloud of negative connotations. Michael Foucault actually talked about this. He's a cool-ass philosopher who died in 1982, I think? But anyway, he has this thing called the repressive hypothesis, which essentially means using language to describe sexuality categorically is inherently seductive. Seductive? Reductive. Whoops. That's a real Freudian. In order to prove this, he talks about this sudden shift in enthusiasm to discuss sexuality once the, like, words for it actually came out and became, like, popularized. And also, he says it's capitalism's fault, so we got there in the end for this one. In fact, we got there pretty early on for this one. So, to recap what we have so far, sexualization, which is bad, gets conflated with sexuality, which is value neutral. Sexuality gets further conflated with mental illness, which is bad, and the language around sexuality is inherently restrictive to begin with, which is even worse, and then capitalism makes everyone afraid to talk about sexuality anyway, which is the fucking pits. And basically, that's it. Now, let's talk about...
Rainbow Dash is so cool.
So before we start, I want to acknowledge something. A study by the Williams Institute says that only 11% of people, when asked, admitted to having had or continued to have feelings of same-gender attraction. So, there. The statistical argument. It's the first one that comes up whenever I bring up any kind of, presumed societal norm. And yeah, at least according to statistics, being gay is not... I was going to say not normal, but not average would even be more accurate. And I'm tempted to just let that sit. To let every person whose first thought was, but statistically, just sit and stare at it. Yeah, okay, 11%. Just think about it. Did you assume that we, the collective queers, had no idea? Is that really what you thought? But also, who died and left statistics king, right? Here are some statistical majorities that are absolutely the fuck not normal. Oh dear. Okay, in my notes here I've written, do something here for rule of threes, but I only have one joke written down, so we're just gonna skip that part. Here are some statistical majorities that are absolutely the fuck not normal. Joke number 1. Joke number 2. The Canadian government between 2011 and 2015. I'm gonna cut that. With that out of the way, let's get right down to it. So, tell me if this looks familiar to you. A man, a woman, 2.5 children, the nuclear family, called such because it gives you radiation poisoning. Anyway, the nuclear family is a pretty recent concept, actually, dating back less than 100 years, and although it's seen as the default, it's only really the default in a Western post-World War II context. In a cultural context, presupposing the nuclear family as being normal alienates people from cultures where it's normal for several generations to live in the same house, or, capitalism forbid, have an entire community rear their young together. And the same is true in the context of sexuality. Sexuality, as we've already covered, is this kind of word that is not great, and people balk at I don't want my kid to learn about sexuality, but I think a lot of people would be able to get behind a child being given a rudimentary understanding of non-traditional family structures, right? See, now there you go. Just do me a favor real quick and shift your thinking. Instead of thinking about what if Rainbow Dash was a lesbian? A lesbian. A word that comes with a lot of negative connotation, as we've already discussed, and instead we think about Rainbow Dash as being predisposed to non-traditional family structure. This isn't to say that the sexual component of sexuality should be disregarded altogether, because there are a lot of people in the queer community for whom sexual liberation is kind of a big part of the thing, but talking about sexuality is not necessarily talking about sex. More than anything, it's talking actually about family structure. I remember the first time I had seen, a childless lesbian couple described as a family, and it clicked. It was oh yeah, I guess that is something that this arrangement of people could be called. I think that's kind of what needs to be understood is it's not, when there's a childless lesbian couple, it's not a harem or some other exclusively sexual relationship. It's just a different kind of family. I think about my Uncle Dean and Aunt Dorothy, who are 70 years old now and never plan on having children and have 17 cats. And I think that is fundamentally not dissimilar to a lesbian family. This was a tangent. Here's my piece on the LGBT stuff and sex education. I would rather have been exposed to the concept of a transgender person at a young age via one of my favorite cartoon characters being trans than the way I was actually exposed to it. Here's another story, so soon after the last one. I learned about being trans 3 times. The first time, I encountered a trans woman at a park when I was very, very little. And I went up to her and I asked her some questions, and when my mom saw me talking to her, she fucking screamed. I was taken home, I was locked in my room, and told to wait for my dad. When my dad came home, he, we'll say, encouraged me to forget what I had seen. And for those of you who know about my relationship with my father, you know exactly what encouraged means. Number 2. When I was 13, I remembered the fact of trans people existing through the fantastic avenue of pornography. So that's great, and totally didn't, forever color my perception of trans people, and totally didn't forever color my perception of myself, and, forever link my self-worth to being sexually attractive. Because why would it? Of course it didn't do that. Why would it do that? Time number 3 was the healthy time, and I say healthy with big air quotes around it because it was still not great. But I was on fucking 4chan, and I went to the LGBT board and, read all of that, all the time. It was, the only shit I consumed on the internet. And then, because I had queer friends, your girl got on Facebook, and I was like, hey, what's all this business about transgenders? And not all of my queer friends were down with trans people at the time. So, that was the healthy time. In fact, being exposed to sexuality in a context that is not inherently sexual is probably, good? I would have rather discovered transgender people through a harmless cartoon about horses than the way that I actually did it. And I know a lot of lesbians who have had, a very similar experience, because, and I guess this is kind of doubling back on the sexualization of sexuality, but, whatever, it's a blended narrative. Because, for a very long time, I only knew about a lot of queer shit as, a genre of porn, lesbian porn. I will not repeat the word that they use for trans women generally in porn, because that would make me sad. But here's the recap for this section. Heteronormativity/nuclear family normativity is bad because it puts queer kids on societal fringes and makes them more likely to encounter, inappropriate sexual content in their quest for, more information about who they actually are and who they think they might be. That's the thing, it's the same problem with, a lot of criminalization or fringification or whatever you want to call it. Either something is legal/normal/whatever, or the people who need it are going to find ways to get it, no matter how dangerous or psychologically damaging those ways can be. So I guess actually what I'm saying is just legalize everything. So let's talk about what's good. This is really good. I really like this. This is pretty good. This is fine, I guess. And we're actually getting further from good with this one. No. Ugh, no, okay, fuck no. So, what actually makes good media representation? I mean, I don't, know definitively, personally. It's not something I'd consider myself an expert on, although I do, write a lot of stuff with trans people in it, because that's, near and dear to my heart, and it's something I make a point to, do correctly. And I have a few opinions, I think good media representation should be obvious and consistent. I think that queer characters should be as complex and interesting as their cisgender heterosexual counterparts. I think, and maybe this is a little granular, but having a queer character's story be entirely about the fact that they're queer is a bad thing. But I also, understand that I'm just one person. I also happen to be one person surrounded by an entire web of queer creatives. So, if I don't want to write this part, I actually don't have to.
What makes good queer representation in a cartoon for me is when it doesn't feel shoehorned in and it's not blown up in your face. Obviously, some people are going to be super visible about their queerness, but personally, I like it when there's just enough information there for you to know. It becomes an issue and the entire thing is about how queer they are?
I think it's a few things. Starting first, I think, with whether or not it's been done before. And I don't keep up with a whole lot of cartoons, but like the prime example I want to use here is Double Trouble from She-Ra. And it's, it's nice to have a character that's explicitly non-binary, but the issue that you run into is it's another instance of this is a non-human character with non-human understandings of gender. So it feels like it's a cop-out to make that character non-binary, It's like, because we've seen the robot or the alien or the non-human character be the token non-binary character before, right? And it's a step in that direction to have a non-binary voice actor working on the character, but it still feels like a cop-out. Next, I think, is probably intent in the person who's writing it. So ideally what you want to do is, if you're going to be writing, a lesbian character, you would want somebody who is a lesbian on your writing staff, ideally, so that they can, in the same way that a lot of, like Craig of the Creek has a lot of actual, like, black, voice actors and writers on the staff. So it's a more honest show in terms of the character that they're trying to portray. So you'd want people who are LGBT on the writing staff to give honest criticism and honest critique of that character and the direction they're going to be going.
I just don't think that you should expect anything from people who make cartoons to like validate your identity. You know what I mean? Like basically, like you can't look to like can't look to Mickey Mouse to like give you a fucking gay cartoon character or whatever. Like it's just not going to happen. And if it does, it's performative or, based on the fact that they can get away with it, like they, it's like being supportive of gay marriage after it got legalized, like once it's a popular idea. And like, I would rather just like engage with media that is made by other queers instead of just like asking for a cartoon to give me a gay pony.
That one show, Clarence, that was like on Cartoon Network for a while. It's like, it does have pretty, like, he, like, the kid has two moms. Like, I forgot his name. It's like the square head kid. Like, he has two moms. I mean, it's a very, like, big thing. He brings it up. You see them, like, frequently. And it's like, it's not like something that, like, it's not like a thing. It's just a thing. And it's, like, nice to see. It can't be pushed to the side. Like, just, like, push. Like, you see it once, never again. It has to be a known fact. And it just has to be there. It can't just be, like, gone after like an episode.
For me, like, I don't know, just seeing like queer characters in cartoons like less as like a crutch for comedy and more as just like existing in like universe and like kind of just being there and kind of normalized and not really like having crazy attention drawn to them is something that I think like really like, I don't know, for me, like when I like a queer character in like any media, they gotta not be like played up like for jokes or something. Like, of course, like in media, like, they do what's profitable, and usually that's like clearing up like stereotypes and shit. Like, oh shit, they're gay. That's nice, and it's not like anything crazy.
So yeah, that. And if you're like obsessed with not directly listening to other queer people, that's fine, I guess, although maybe fix that. But GLAAD actually puts out a media reference guide as well. You can find at glaad.org/reference. That's GLAAD with 2 A's. Which is intended for journalists, but honestly applies pretty well to fiction as well. And it's a really good resource if you have no real clue where to start. Essentially, what you should take from this is just listen to queer people. I know, like, if you don't want to, you're not going to, but if you can stomach it, just, like, listen to queer people if you want to tell a queer story. Like, okay, it's kind of irresponsible fiction to say, write a historical fiction novel about a real war that happened if you also don't, like, know a decent amount about that war, right? It's like, okay, so this is another tangent, but there's this game called Wolfenstein, and I'm really pulling shit out of my ass now. Wolfenstein is a game about World War II, and it uses the swastika to illustrate, like, you're killing Nazis, which is rock and roll, and I love that. And it's like that because Silas Warner, the original designer, was really fascinated with World War II and, like, kind of... His Wikipedia page is a little iffy on it, but he seemed to not like Nazis very much at all. And who does? Right? Right, guys? But he also inspired another developer at the time named John Romero. And John Romero, because he loved Castle Wolfenstein, decided to put an homage to it in his game, Doom. But unfortunately, you see, because John didn't think, and John didn't seem to know any Jewish people, the thing that he put in his game to pay homage to Castle Wolfenstein was also a homage to something else that maybe shouldn't be homaged to. John? All of this to say, just, like, listen to queer people. If you're gonna put queer people in your media, and I really think you should, just listen to them. Next section.
I wish she'd be my friend.
But now, the moment you've all been waiting for. Definitive, irrefutable proof that Rainbow Dash is a lesbian. Drum roll, please. In the series finale, she walks in with Applejack, and they talk kind of like I've seen old lesbians talk. Which, by the way, Applejack? What is this? When this was right here? When this could have been? And then she gets married to him? He tried to do, like, a genocide more than once. That's fucked. I don't know. I'm Maddie Girlmeat. Video's over. Bye.
I'm in Miami, followed by a day or two and more, where new arson looted or from Ed Rainbow.
Rainbow Dash has once again attacked a sovereign nation.
With Miami followed day and night of looting and burning, 10 persons and 120 injured.
Iceberg, more sporadic users.
A dusk to dawn has been closed with Miami following day and night of looting and burning, 10 persons and 120 injured. A dusk to dawn has been closed with Miami following day and night of looting and burning, 10 persons and 120 injured. A dusk to dawn has been closed with Miami following day and night of looting and burning, 10 persons and 120 injured.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.